You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
All right. Hello and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. This month we are talking about dance. Why does it matter? How does it look for goths versus everyone else? Where does it fit within the identity of goth culture? And does it empower bodily agency, or do we still have these sort of issues of autonomy and personal space within the community? We're also going to be reviewing the new album from the band Tomb of Love. We've got Sinister Suggestions, some chat about music, and a whole lot more. So as always, I am the Count, and I'm here with my co-host Trey. Hello, Trey.
Hello, Count.
And you know what? I didn't ask. Do you prefer to go by Hayley, or do you have a...
No, I don't have a fancy goth name.
Okay, cool. Hayley. Hayley, thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, totally.
So let's get into it. I like to do a little brief introduction so that the listener can kind of get to know you a bit. So tell us a little about how you were introduced to goth or alternative culture, and why you've stuck with it for so long, and a little about anything else you'd like to share about yourself.
This is going to show my age, like right off the bat, but for me, I found out what Vampire Freaks was when I was like 13. And I just remember there was a moment where I was sitting in the dark on the family computer because we had one computer. And like that's it. Back in the day when you had the like computer room and your parents were like, you can't be on the computer past X, Y, and Z time. But they had like a music player, just like MySpace, RIP, used to have. And
Facebook just added one. Did you see that?
I haven't seen it yet, but it's kind of like they're stealing everything. But sorry, Mark Zuckerberg. So I was sitting in the dark listening to Endless Skies by VNV Nation, and you know, everyone hates on VNV Nation, but that song, when I was like a little teenager, I was just like, this is immense. Like,
absolutely,
it was just like, and it's very simplistic, but it was just a lot. And I was like, you know what? This is really, really cool. And, you know, there's the gothsicles too, which are ridiculous and quirky. So, like, there's something for everyone is kind of what I learned from a very early time. And I branched off into a bunch of other stuff for a while, but I came back to it when I was 18. After I graduated, I got kicked out of my mom's boyfriend's house, and I was living, like, kind of like in a lot of very transitionary situations that weren't very stable. But I met someone at a coffee shop, and they were like, you know what? You look like you would like this place. And of course, the place was a goth club, City Club in Detroit, Michigan. That's where I'm from. And we would like pregame in the parking lot. And like one of the first things he ever played me was Pigface.
Okay.
And like that's totally different from VNV Nation,
that's quite
right?
An introduction, yeah.
So I'm sitting there listening to Asphole with my future roommate who's like drinking like guava juice with vodka, which is gross AF, but you know, you do what you do. And we get in there and it's just this like it's this magical like place where the door's not marked. You go up this very, very, very scary looking staircase, but it's still in a basement of a hotel. And it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Like, it was this massive, big dance club. And like, it had been there for so long, and it's still there to my knowledge. People won't go as much anymore, but it's like one of the oldest ones left. I'm sure there are other ones that I just haven't been to, but it was special. I've been going out dancing since 2012, late 2011, and that's not as long as a lot of people. I mean, there are people that are like lifers, you know, and honestly, I just felt like I could be myself, and every single person I met, like, they held no judgment, and I really just felt like that was where I was supposed to be. So, from VNV to
Mm.
Pigface, that's pretty much
Mhm.
just kind of how it started. And
Ah,
dancing, dancing, I didn't really know what I was doing when I first started going out, and I don't think anyone really does. But you just get
mm,
onto the dance floor in a space like that, and you just kind of figure it out based on, like, what music really grabs you and really kinda touches you.
mm,
So,
mhm. Yeah, that oh man, that experience of stepping into that goth space for the first time is just incredible.
'cause yeah, 'cause, like, the bar was, like, these, like, cinder blocks that are translucent. You could see, like, the, like, glowing lights through them. Like, if you've ever been to Old Neo, like, it had the similar kinda
Yeah.
stuff. And which City Club's massive. Oh my god, like, it was, like, maybe 5, 10 times the size. It was just so huge. They still will host Detroit Electronic Music Festival, or I'm sorry, it's called Movement now. After parties
Mm.
there, and they usually they usually blow out the sound every time because they don't know how to run soundboards. But it's just such an incredible space with so much history, and I'm really
And
grateful for that experience, and I feel like a lot of people, your first club experience like that really is special. Meeting
oh
those
yeah.
people and networking like that, you just really kind of have a
Yeah.
chance to figure out who you are in a
Yeah.
sense that's removed from, like, the behind the keyboard to in real life experience.
Yeah. I try and keep that in the back of my mind when I get o- over frustrated about politics and the way we treat each other and drama and that kind of thing, and just try to remember what it was like to that essence of feeling like you've stepped into this other world that
Yeah.
resonates with what you had been feeling, and try to embody that. But so you're not in Denver anymore though, right? Is that right? you're
No,
you're in New
I'm
York.
I'm I'm at Albany, New York, the
Okay.
state capital of Albany, or New York even. Wow, herpaderp. Anyway, so yeah, I am in what people don't really know of New York State. I didn't even know there was much other parts of New York until I met people from Albany. I was like, oh, there's other parts of New York that aren't New York City, because I was from
Mm,
Michigan. I don't know anything about the
right,
East
right.
Coast.
Yeah.
Um, and it's different up here. There's a night called X Humanity that still runs. I was working on putting together a night of my own. The venue fell through, unfortunately, but I'm still working on
Uh,
it with a friend of mine whose project I work with. The project's called Vellocinate. We made an album together. I'm really proud of it. So, trying
awesome.
to do some stuff out here, but I end
Can
up
we
dancing everywhere. So,
is
yeah.
that album something we can
Yeah,
find
definitely.
online?
It's on Bandcamp. I'll give the
Okay,
spelling.
cool.
Let me see. Yeah, I'm gonna do it near, like, the end or whatever when we, like, do the fancy thing,
Cool.
you
Yeah, and
know?
I'll if you send it to me, or I'll grab it off the show and put it in the show notes as well, so people can just
Sweet.
click the link too. So speaking also as a Midwesterner, how far are you from the city?
From New York
From New
City? Oh
York?
my god. It's,
Yeah.
like, 2 hours, but that's if there's no
Okay.
traffic.
Yeah.
Which,
Okay.
hello,
Yeah,
there's
for sure.
always traffic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I take a bus down there when I usually go, or the train. And honestly, New York City is so different. Like, no hate, but Chicago is special to me. I used to drive to Chicago, and even though the drive was 4 hours, the whole trip I would be blasting, like, all of the wax tracks, like, industrial artists that I loved. Like, I just
Mhm.
have these, like, radio stations of music playing, and I would just feel like pumping myself up. Last year, for Cold Waves in New York City, I was working for that, and I've been going to Cold Waves since the second festival, and that was a really big moment for me, to be up there and, like, helping be a part of something that really,
Yeah.
really did a lot for me and does a lot for a lot of people. Chicago has something
Yeah.
really special, for sure. But yeah, I
Yeah.
kind of I don't know what the East Coast really is about in regards to goth. I feel like Brooklyn is just Brooklyn. It's very different. It's not just goth. It's like that's the thing with a lot of these newer bands. I feel like they aren't so much goth as they are very much about like defying, like sticking to any kind of label or genre. Like they bend everything. And I like that, but at the same time sometimes I don't know what to expect when I go to a show. So, not
Yeah.
the worst thing.
Yeah.
It's just different.
Yeah, I'm kind of into that, and I think I'll touch on that a little more when we talk about cybergoth. But I like that there's this spectrum. I think from the edge where you're blurring the lines and you're not totally sure what fits into what, and then you back off from there into more and more traditionally recognizable goth music.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that we have that spectrum right now is really, really cool, and it gives me a lot of interesting things to listen
Oh,
to.
trust me. Like, if you've never listened to SRSQ, like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah,
See, that's like,
yeah,
I
for
say
sure.
all the stuff I just said, but at the same time, my music taste is very diverse. Like, if anything, trad goth is one of the things that I listen to the very least. But at the same time, I've come more and more to appreciate it, like, especially because of the very pretty obvious connections a lot of the newer school music has to music of the past. I think they pay a lot of homage to really big artists. Like, have you listened to High Functioning Flesh at all?
Oh god, yeah, they're
Like Cabaret
fantastic.
Voltaire to the nth degree in a great way. And
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that's just one
yeah.
example. Like you could go off forever. And in a way I really like it. I don't people get like, "Oh, well, get your own style." And I'm like, this stuff influences itself, and I think that's a very good thing. You know, it reminds us we won't forget our past, and I think that's important in a lot of
Mm,
respects. So,
yeah, cool. I dig
mhm.
it. All right, let's talk about dance. Goth and dance are pretty ubiquitous, and especially the unique dance styles within goth, they tend to be staples of club and concert events.
Mhm.
And the dances themselves get kind of parodied or in joked about or talked about in the kind of subcultural media, but actual discussion around the relevance of dance to the spaces and the ways that they differ from broader culture, and how the way that we dance relates to notions of the body and autonomy and that kind of thing don't really get talked about. So that's
No, they don't.
um yeah, so that's what I wanted to kind of start to explore in this episode. And just for the listeners, the idea for this in part came from a video discussion on CoalCandy's YouTube channel. He sat down and talked with a cybergoth, and they had a pretty broad discussion about dance and cybergoth itself and that kind of thing. We'll cover some of that here. I'm not going to be directly referencing it, but if you want to check it out, I'll have a link to it in the show notes as well. So I want to start by talking about the relevance of dance to each of our own experiences as a goth, and also what you think that dance does for the culture. So for me, if I could just share a couple thoughts
Oh
first,
yeah.
um, I think one of the things that dance does is provide another level of individual expression,
Mhm.
and allow for, and I'm going to use this word a lot, embodiment of the kind of mythical and gothic worlds that we love to read about and that we love to create. We're able to kind of bring those uh, esoteric and intangible stories and feelings into a physical space. And it also serves as a communal experience. It's pretty
Definitely.
common for goth dancers to be kind of siloed off and be dancing separately from each other, but underneath that there's still an engagement with with the DJ, the environment, the other dancers, and even the like historic tradition of what dance has meant in goth spaces. So I think that's part of it. But before I kind of share more of my thoughts, I want to hand it over to you guys and see, just from sort of your personal experiences, what does dancing mean for you, as you know, personally, and then what do you think it means for goth as sort of a broader entity?
I want to hear from Trey.
All right.
Yeah, I do as well.
Um,
And by the way, just to make this public, Andy Harriman told me when she DJ'd Cold Waves that Trey was one of the best goth dancers she had ever seen. So
How
you
did
got
I
some
not
credentials
see
there,
you
bud.
dance?
I don't know. Well, this was Cold Wave Chicago. I don't know if you were there this
I
last year.
was, yeah.
Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, dance is really my key form of expression when it comes to being out and about. I'm not necessarily about spectacular style and outrageous looks, though I do dress up. It is really about the expression of dance, which I learned, as we already said, multiple people do, by going out to a dance club and just kind of watching for a while and being intrigued by this dancing that isn't, what you would have seen at other things. And then just getting out there and trying it and feeling the music and feeling the pulse of the floor, the people around you, and just absorbing all of that energy and then trying to mold it in a way that both expresses you as well as expresses the music you're dancing to. I feel that dance is a dialogue between my individual perceptions of the music being played by the DJ and the space in which I'm dancing. So I do try to move around in the space and utilize the space as much as I can, which is why I do like to generally get out to nights early so I can have at least a little bit of a time when I have almost the entire floor to myself. So I have freedom to move around, though it is its own interesting game to fit within a crowd of dancers and to move amongst them.
Oh yeah.
But usually when the crowd gets, when the floor gets busier, I spend more time on the side just observing and watching. So really, dance to me is a communication. I try to take what the song is giving to me, filter it through my impressions, my understanding of the song, and then express it back out so that those watching can, if they're watching me specifically, they could maybe understand a little bit of how the song is making me feel and what I am trying to say through movement.
That was perfect. And I feel like, I don't really get to talk to a lot of people in depth about dance myself. And I related to a lot of what you just said.
Well, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Now I want to see you dance even more.
It is, I don't know if I told you before, Trey, but I enjoy watching you dance because it relates very much to the types of dance that I was introduced to initially in the sort of the goth circles that I was in. The very dramatic, like, if to me that's like classic goth dancing, and so it really brings like a kind of nostalgia when I get to see you dance. It's fun for me. So
Well, good. I'm glad. It's too bad that most of the time when we go out to the same club, it's a club that I don't really care for the music as much at. So I don't dance much, because the hard part is my dance style tends to lend itself more towards the floatier romantic gothy type stuff, your Dead Can Dancey type stuff, or some of the, I also will go off on some of the weird experimental industrial, because I do enjoy dancing to some Einstürzende Neubauten or Skinny Puppy.
Yeah.
But if it's got a steady 4/4 beat, I'm not interested.
For me, I kind of like, I really don't like when things are repetitive for a long period of time. And like, there's a lot of people that are just like, oh yeah, no, but that's where it's at. And I'm like, I like when songs have structure that changes so I don't die. Because, like, if you're just grinding forever, like, it's
Yeah.
rough on you, at least for me. Um, Gosh, I mean, for me, dancing has been such an important part of reconnecting to myself because I I'm a victim of sexual assault, and for a long time I would dissociate, which if you're not really familiar, it's just where you kind of really separate from your physical as a person. You just kind of really check out, and dancing over the years has really helped me reconnect physically and really appreciate and like care about my body. And a few things really have, and it's really been an amazing exercise in mindfulness and connection between a place that I used to put a lot of distance between, my mind and my body, and just kind of like my spirit in general. I was very, very just lost for a long time. And like, if I didn't have dance, I don't know what I would do sometimes. And it's definitely been fewer and far between with my move and some other things that have gone on. But like, you talked about the relationship and like the communication that you can have in that space. And I also really identify as someone who's very empathic, empathetic, and just being in that space and feeling everyone having a good time. It's one of the best things ever, and like nothing really tops that when people are just at the peak of the night, really dancing and having a great time. I definitely am not a flowy romantic goth dancer. My friend DJ Devil's Advocate out in Boston says that his wife is like hips and elbows or something like that, and he's like, you're like fists and like long limbs or something, and like I definitely like have adopted a lot more of an aggressive style moving to the East Coast. Although I can't lie, I love 80s new wave. Like dancing to 80s new wave, it's just like you don't really think about like it's a whole other thing. It's like cheesy like storytelling at that point. Like you're following like the cheesy like lyrics of the time. But man, I don't know. Like one of my favorite recent memories of dancing in a crowd was Meat Beat Manifesto at Cold Waves. Every time it's just instant dance party on the floor. And to me it's like they're like techno, and at the same time it's like all these people, wearing all these like industrial or like goth shirts, and they're just all like dancing and having a good time. And I feel like a lot of people are apprehensive and nervous about the way they look when they dance. But every time I've seen Meat Beat Manifesto, people they just can't help themselves. They just start dancing. And it's one of the best things when people just stop worrying about what they look like and just let go and dance because it doesn't matter at that moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the best important things that goth dancing really can do. People don't feel like they have to stack on top of each other. They respect each other's space. And in a weird way, it kind of teaches you like this etiquette of, like you were mentioning, bodily autonomy. You're respecting people's space in which they need to do their certain style of dance, because everyone takes up certain space on the dance floor. Some people don't take up a lot of space. Then there's people like me that have really large wingspan. So that can I've hit people. It's not, I feel bad, but it happens.
It happens all the time, though, and that's one of the things that's really enjoyable about a goth dance floor is you see the people, they're dancing, they're expressing themselves, they're lost in the music, and they collide and both stop, they engage with one another, they apologize and go back to dancing.
Yeah.
It's usually very cordial. I've seen problems too, but not usually with regulars. Usually it's outsiders might have an issue. But in general, there's a lot of civility and a lot of just communication on the floor. And we understand mistakes happen. Flailing is part of the style. You will get hit, but it's not like a mosh pit where it's expected you're going to get hit. It happens. We move on. We don't try to persist at doing that. And I think I find that a very comforting part of the dancing experience at most goth clubs.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it's a very different interaction than at, say, a hardcore show,
Oh my
where you
God.
do still have you have some space because you've got people windmilling and like, doing high kicks and stuff, but it's not you kind of expect to get bruised and things. I've just been in the general vicinity and punched and kicked in the face at least 3 times. No one bothered to ask if I was okay. So yeah, definitely a different experience than like that as an analog. But that's a whole other like subcultural, expression and understanding that maybe we won't get into. But for me, when it comes to dance, and I'll say that, the way I interpret, I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, just in different ways. I want to, I'm going to, throughout the conversation, I want to talk in this from sort of a philosophical perspective, but I don't think the meaning that you get from dance or from goth needs to be tied to some understanding of a greater cultural ideology or anything like that. For something to be meaningful and substantive, you don't have to understand it through philosophy or through some academic lens. That's just the way that, for me personally, I like to engage with and understand cultural interaction in general. So that said, I'm not a very dramatic dancer. I do basically the gothic 2-step. I don't really move my arms around. I kind of move my shoulders and my hips and go back and forth, side to side, that kind of thing. But it's still, I feel, engaging with what's happening. A lot of times I'll have my eyes closed because it brings about that sort of embodiment of the feeling of transcendence in that space, feeling like I'm part of the fog, part of the atmosphere that's created through the decorations, the architecture, if that's part of it, the sense of connection with the decorated people, the mood of the music, and all of that kind of thing. It's an expression of giving myself over to this metaphysical space that I can melt into a sense of being removed, time being removed, unmoored from the mundane, and being able to experience that simultaneously with other people is really powerful and meaningful for me. And yeah, and the music plays into that as well. I think one of you mentioned the moods of the music. For me, like if you go from a moody 80s track to something like, I don't know, Aganoise or something, you're gonna kill it for me. But that's kind of a whole other beast, because that's like part of the engagement with going to a goth club is who is sulking in the shadows during one song and who's making a statement by walking off the floor to talk with their friends when that's a whole other. And I don't know if that happens at other clubs.
Oh,
but
I'm going to share a story, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
So one of the clubs that I went with, I wasn't actually here for the event. I mostly heard. It was more of a story from the past. But the first goth club I went to, C Street down in Chambana, was where I first experienced the whole goth club atmosphere and life. So that was my introduction to it. So it of course does hold a special place in our heart. But there was a, I guess, somewhat contentious relationship between the house DJ and the general crowd. It wasn't as much of a, I guess, friendly environment as you mostly assume it is in other clubs. So there was a little bit of a protest, and sometimes he wouldn't play stuff that everybody liked. And so there was one point, I don't know what was being played. Something got played. Nobody liked it. So a bunch of people, the floor was empty. A bunch of people went out on the floor, sat down, and were playing Magic the Gathering in the center of the floor.
Oh my God. No.
And it was just, this is sucking. You're not playing what we want. So we're just going to sit here with a little
Wow.
protest.
That's amazing.
So it was,
Oh, man.
it's a great story. I mean, in general, it was a good scene. And while the DJ was sort of outside of the scene and just, he was part of the bar and did play the music and he did play requests, but it was,
I was gonna say,
it wasn't as good a relationship.
If he doesn't play requests, I can't stand DJs that are against requests. Like, you have to have a little
Yeah.
bit of wiggle room. I'm a DJ too,
Yeah.
and it's like I try to I'm still gathering a collection of music, but you have to kind of you have to be receptive to. Without your dancers, you as a DJ have nothing. So
Mhm.
it's just you could sit there and DJ for yourself, or you could actually DJ.
Yeah, no, being able to take requests is important. I don't like DJs that just take requests.
Oh no.
I do like some sort of an editorial voice
Mm-hmm.
around it, but being able to listen to the crowd, and it's even beyond requests, just watching the crowd as a DJ, you can tell what they dig on, what they don't. It's important, especially if you're a DJ for a single night over an extended period of time. You start to learn what your core crowd will dance to, what will bring them into the space and bring them to their joy of dance. And then you can start to play with that. So it's great to play that one track that everybody requests every week. But it's also good to try to develop a repertoire of stuff that goes with that song and fits around that song, to try to introduce people who only want to hear this one song. And maybe they'll stick on the floor if you transition to another song that's close enough but different, and then maybe they'll come up to you. That's the big win, of course, as a DJ, when the person comes up, what was that song you were just playing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And then you've
Or people are-
introduced to something new.
Scary Lady Sarah just did an interview I heard on a podcast, and she said one of her greatest thrills was when she would see a bunch of people pull out their phones to what is that? Not Spotify.
Shazam.
No, it's Shazam.
Shazam the song. Yeah, that's really exciting for her, which is, I agree. I think that's pretty cool. And it's funny. I've been to a few I don't know, after parties, but dance nights in a nerd convention, and there's some weird shit that happens, but I've never seen the dance floor just sit down and play Magic the Gathering before.
And you
which
think
seems
at a
the
nerd
place that would happen.
convention, yeah.
So that's pretty awesome that's even a thing. All right, well, let's I want to talk a little about the meaning we can take from these sort of, we like to, or at least some of these, joke videos, like Black Friday did one, but even back to the 90s, there have been videos and guides, and, Voltaire has some templates for goth dance moves in his book. So I want to quickly get your opinions on how we understand and analyze these interpretations of goth dances. So I have a few examples here, because there's some academic analyses around goth dance, and I want to run some of these by you and see if they make sense or if you have other views on it. So I've seen goth dancing described as performative death, a way of acting out the torture of existing in society through melancholy movements that reflect some internal malaise, which that one kind of makes me giggle. But
It doesn't make any sense to me at all.
I'm trying not to laugh.
Yeah. I've seen it describe different dance moves being direct references to Dracula or ghosts or other gothic monsters, and the connection there is that the idea that goths fashion themselves as the other, and those gothic monsters are the ultimate other, so they are being mimicked in dance moves. Another example I read was about dancing as one of slowly dying, which embodies the goth fascination with morbidity.
That's the
And then
first one again.
yeah, there's a separate paper. And then the last example I have here is actually a quote from Mick Mercer, who once said that the taffy pulling move was culled from the film adaptation of Mask of the Red Death. So does any of that ring true? Is it just nonsense, or is there, how do you guys parse those
I feel like
generally distinctive styles of?
I feel like they're thinking too seriously about it.
Mm-hmm.
When I
I
think
don't even
of
think that.
distinctive like goth dancing, like the picking the goth apples or screwing the goth light bulb or like waving like a leafless tree in the wind and clearing the cobwebs, or your boots are stuck in the mud kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think one is Stomp on the Hobbits.
yeah,
Something like
stomp on the
Yeah.
hobbits.
Or the I've lost my contacts.
Yes. I mean, I like everybody kind of. I think the best part about goth dancing is that it can look like whatever you want, honestly. Like, people just try things, and whatever works for them works for them. Like, listening to that interview that was on, was it CoalCandy? I almost said
Yeah,
Coal
CoalCandy.
Chamber.
Yeah.
But like, they were talking about, the invention of industrial dance, and I was like, I just can envision someone starting to try to move their body, and it just kind of happened, and someone looked over and was like, you know what, maybe I'll try that. Because I found myself over time, like, Trey, you mentioned watching how other people dance. I've also like watched how other people dance, and like later on, maybe someone recorded video, even though they're not supposed to, and I've seen video of myself dancing. I'm like, holy shit, I started dancing like other people. That's really weird. And I think over time it just kind of happens. But in that sense, it is very communal, and you are very easily influenced by other people. So I feel like it's very communal, even though there's a lot more space on goth dance floors than like a top 40 bar dance floor. Like, infinitely more space. Yeah.
So, as far as my thoughts on, I guess, those little descriptions, a lot of them seem like they're starting from the perspective of what are the stereotypes about goth, and then let's dump that onto the dancing.
Yeah.
Especially the first and the third one, where they started with this death and morbidity and yada, yada, yada. And as far as the people who are expressing that melancholy and death and morbidity, those are the people smoking clothes over in the corner, not on the dance floor.
Yeah.
The dance floor is not
yeah,
about celebrating death and malaise. The dance floor is about catharsis and release.
Yes.
It's active. It's not passive. It's not dwindling. It's where we get out, those other emotions. I mean, goth is known as this sort of death obsessed thing from the outside, but those of us on the inside know it's more about just the accepting of all of these passions. We're not burying them. We're not caging things under this idea of what is proper decorum. We're acknowledging them and releasing them. And an acknowledgement of death is certainly a part of that. And that's definitely the most, I guess, visually obvious part to the outside, the thing that's the most bizarre as an outsider looking in at goth, is this sort of embracing of death, but it's not an embracing like, oh, everything is death, death, death. Death is just, I mean, it's, as a mortal species, the source of, great fear, great, powerful emotions surround death. And we hide from it because we're afraid of those emotions. And in goth, it's about embracing all of those emotions and embracing death through engaging with that response, both the fear, the sadness, the pain, all of that's in there. But by the same token, all that stuff can only exist alongside of the joy and the passion and all that other stuff. And that's the dance floor expresses all of that, but definitely the more active sides, because I guess some of the moves can do a little bit of the death type of thing, a little bit some of the more passive things, and there's that stuff that happens in lulls and where people are dancing to the spaces of the song rather than the power of the song, and that can be a little bit of that, but I'd say it expresses more the little death than actually death.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It always feels like
Yeah.
exorcism of, like, you mentioned catharsis. It just feels like really working out emotions.
Yes.
Exorcisms are very gothic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Trey, I think I was kind of thinking along the same lines in that I do think there is some substance to that kind of campy dramaticism, which I think you did explain brilliantly. But looking at it from like an ethnographer's perspective, I think it is easy to read into the really like distinctive style of dancing that I talked about. We've talked about the dancers being separated. I don't think that's something that happens at other clubs. At least that's what I've been told. I don't go to other clubs, so I don't know.
I do.
Yeah. So is this pretty unique to goth then?
It is. I mean, there are clubs that aren't like that, and when you get into some of the electronic scenes, it's more akin to goth because people are sort of in their own space and don't really
Yeah.
dance with each other as much. But when you go to the more, I guess, popular dance clubs, the Velvet Rope kind of places that are playing the R&B and that are, more or less meat markets, for the lack of a better term, there is a lot more dancing together or dancing in groups. Now, sometimes the groups, one trope of a lot of those dance spaces involves you're with a group of friends and you circle up. So you create an empty space in this big circle, which if you're not in the circle is extremely annoying because they're taking up extra dance floor. But they usually in that space, it becomes a stage. So usually one person then goes out to the center, they do some dance, they get the accolades of the crowd, then they'll go off. Someone else will either be pulled in, sometimes it's a nomination process. Oh, you go next, you come in. And it's an interesting dynamic, and that's definitely something on the normal side of some of the social dance clubs. And then there are, of course, the ones that it's all just who can I grind up with against next, and there's that whole grindy sexual thing, which it can be fun on occasion, and I see that happening in goth clubs on occasion too, and I've done it at goth clubs on occasion too, but it's very circumstantial and very much in the moment. And it's only appropriate, of course, when it's welcomed and invited from the others, because that's where it becomes a problem, is when it is a way that people use to show they're interested as they go up to somebody and they just start grinding on them. And that is where the problem starts.
Oh, don't I know it?
Yeah. We'll get into that in a second. So put a pin in it. I can't believe I just said that. But yeah, I do think there is some connection to the I guess goth veneration of introspection, like individuality and otherness that I mentioned before. But yeah, I think Hayley, it's probably closer to what you were describing as this sort of learned form of expression from being within the goth milieu that resonates with everyone in some aspect of their identity, from like or aesthetic tastes or that kind of thing.
There's definitely a learned language of dance, and that's where the term baby bat is actually probably appropriate, because we do learn it like babies learn language. There's no point of reference. There's no this is this, this is this, this is this. We're there with very little context in this very strange and foreign environment, and we're witnessing this panoply of people on the floor doing all kinds of different things, and we just start letting our mind free associate. Oh, this is what the music's making me feel, and this person over there, what I'm seeing them doing seems to mesh with that, so I'm going to integrate that into my own dance language, and maybe try to emulate that, maybe practice it at home, be in front of a mirror, that sort of thing. But it's not about learning moves. It's about learning how the vision of other people dancing meshes with the feelings that the music is giving you, and then accumulating those you know movitic words and turning them into your own personal style and how you choose to express yourself.
Mm.
That was the most eloquent use of baby bat ever.
Thank you. It just came to me.
Each place in the States really has their type of music that they like, I think. And I also see different types of dancing in different places. Like upstate New
Mhm.
York, like he was talking about hardcore dancing. Well, people
Mhm.
in like the Albany goth scene don't really hardcore dance, but they definitely they do this move that's a lot more like they like bend their knees and like they do some like stomping. Like they stomp. Like
Oh
it's
yes, we definitely had a fair amount of that in some of our floors. It's very much high step,
yes, the
hard
high.
stomp
Yep.
for those very militaristic songs.
Mhm.
Yeah, we definitely see that around. I don't do that as much, but I will stomp along with a stompier song, but not usually doing the high stepping things.
Yeah, I've started doing it, and unfortunately, my knees do not like that I do that now.
Just got to start doing more squats.
You know,
Keep them limber.
just start incorporating goth squats.
Yeah, yeah.
It's fine.
How are your goth squats, Count?
The only thing I'm squatting on these days is a dildo, so
Yep. I know.
not much in the gym. I want to before we get into the sort of issues around bodily autonomy, I want to talk about ritual really quick. I mentioned this on the Goth class episode, the notion of ritual and the sacred and how those connect the community to engender this a sort of meta sense of meaning. But I think this relates to dancing, as dancing adds that dramaturgical or performative act of ritual, which is important in just general understandings of ritual. It functions as a way to reinforce identity, to exchange cultural capital, to show that you are committed, you are goth, you are part of the community, and that performative element of ritual is present in outside of goth as far as rituals, community rituals are concerned. I pulled this quote from Christina Golding that I thought was interesting, that I wanted to mention. She says that clubbing requires leaving the everyday behind, a period of physical and psychological readjustment, congregation, and transformation. Rituals emphasize cooperation and integration of actions. They have their structures and procedures that begin with initiation, anticipation, and preparation. These actions may be formal, significant, or symbolic. However, they rely on individuals being educated or socialized into the scene and are directly linked to the actual experience, how the music is used, the nature of dance, social interaction, and mental states, which in the case of clubbing often verges on the sacred. And I don't know if that resonates with you
Oh
guys at all, but I
yeah.
like the idea. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea of creating of this being a ritual, from preparing to go out when you're at home, to driving there, to dancing, and the idea of this as a sacred thing for those in the community, and the idea of a community ritual, I think, is really powerful, and kind of brings together everything we've been talking about.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely sacred. I feel like it goes right back to it being a communal thing, but at the same time, it's very much an individual experience for each person. It's both
Mm.
individual and communal at the same time, but it creates a sense of rightness with yourself, and also a sense of belonging, and just definitely a sense of she talked about leaving the world behind, like, to go into that atmosphere, and you definitely do. You definitely, like, for me personally, I definitely, like, when I'm getting ready, depending on where I'm at emotionally, I really channel that into whatever ends up on my face, like, pigment-wise.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
but yeah, no, it all adds up together to it's just kind of like getting to that point of climax and just coming back down at the end and be like, you know what?
Mm.
Yeah, I really needed that. I really needed
Mm.
to
Yeah.
have that moment.
So for me, and I don't know if it's just my preconceptions around the concept of ritual that doesn't resonate with me at all. I dislike ritual intensely. And I find the escape from the normal world to be my escape from ritual, not my
Mm,
escape to ritual. Because the regular world, when you're navigating in the regular world and you're at work and you're commuting, there are a lot of structures in place
9 to
that
5.
you kind of have to toe the line, follow the patterns, do the structure.
Mhm.
And going out clubbing to me is a time when I can let that go. In a sense that it's very free. I escape the patterns. I don't need to worry about structures, and I don't need to
Mm.
worry about you do this, then do this, then do this. It's a very unstructured experience, and I don't do the whole. I mean, I understand the idea of ritual in goth community has been brought up a lot of times, and I am not saying that that is a false equivalency. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in the goth community. It's just not my passion within the
Right.
community. I acknowledge it's important for a lot of other people, and I see
Sure.
that, and awesome, more power to you. Enjoy it. If that gives you comfort, that's great. But for me, I mean, it's very much, I'm just letting things go. I mean, I don't do a whole
Right.
ritual when I get ready. It's like, the club is coming and I'm just doing other stuff. And then, oh my God, I got to get ready. I run into my closet. I look, what do I want to wear? What do I want to wear? I'm looking around and picking stuff up and putting things around. And like, does this look good? Does this look good? I wore that last time. What does this look like? And I'm just kind of like throwing things together at the last minute
Mm.
and then rushing out the door.
It's not purposeful, taking your time kind of thing.
No, it's very
Right. Right.
much, no, I want to go,
Right.
but I want to just sort of, I want to get in there's a degree of getting in the mood, I guess, but it's more like a last minute, oh, I want to, look presentable there a little bit. It's that little vestige of the normal world that I still put on as I go out to the club. But then
Mm.
when I'm there, I'm not worried about what order to do things and what the protocol is. I go and I want to experience it in the moment. I don't want to have
Mm.
pre-existing expectations. I don't want to have an idea of how things should be or could be. I want to just be there and experiencing it. That's part of why I'm also not a person who does requests. I just want to have the night happen to me
Mm.
and then
Mm.
react to it in the moment rather than trying to shape it in a way that cultivates it towards, oh, I really want to hear this and I really want to hear that, and every once in a while I might really want to hear something, but it's rare. I usually just want to be surprised by whatever the DJ plays next, and maybe discover this great new thing, or they'll play this great song that I haven't heard in years and I'll go out and be all nostalgic about it and express myself
Mm.
with a song that I've danced to dozens upon dozens of times and have almost a dance choreographed in my mind to that song. So that's kind of how
Mm.
I view it. So to me, it's very much not a ritualistic thing.
Mm.
But like I said, I
So
can't say it shouldn't be.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair, as not using ritual as a framework through which to understand all experience of dance. I think you're kind of getting at the Van Elfren's sort of embracing of the liminality and being unmoored from time and space to let that experience play out and not be the kind of structured thing that it is, this space outside of, you know, what you would normally expect for the structure of the 9 to 5 and all that kind of thing.
A little bit, but I don't take since I have finished that book now, the ideas of liminality, I guess I view them as not quite as, and maybe that's me being more goth, but they aren't quite as unsettling as they try to portray it in a lot of that. They're all about this liminality and this unstructured nature of things, and this between states is unsettling and it's disturbing, and that's where the power
she ties
is.
it to hauntography and hauntology and
right.
that kind of thing.
And I can understand where that would be the case or why that could be the case. And I also see that it's one of my frustrations around Lovecraft's work, is that they're kind of based on this idea that, oh, these things that don't fit into your rational world are terrifying and will make you go insane. And like, no, that's the things that I like. I want the stuff that is bizarre and new and different. I crave that. And they're not unsettling to me. They're possibilities, they're adventures, they're exciting. And I like embracing that thing. And I don't find it unnerving. And I'm not, I don't find being unnerved to be something that's an aspiration.
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree with that. Certainly. And obviously what is unnerving and uncanny to one person may or may not be to another person. But okay, cool. So let's talk about bodily autonomy and some of our personal experiences. We mentioned that there are different reasons that people will dance and experience dance. Some of those include being insular and private. But as I think, Trey, you mentioned, we sort of all know, even as we're within our own sort of universe, our own worlds, at some point we kind of realize there are others watching us or admiring us or perhaps judging us, both around the club and on the dance floor. So I'm interested to hear what your experiences are with that, and what, do we run into sort of like body shaming or speaking to someone that doesn't want to be spoken to, that kind of thing.
Well,
yeah, I'm going to let you go first, Hayley, because you would have a very different experience than I think either Count or I would have on that particular topic.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also frustrating because I didn't really include this in my introduction, but I identify as genderqueer. So like, and gender identity is something that's very much within you. It's not something that's necessarily your presentation all the time. And gender expression is like very much an external construct that people associate with all of gender. And
yes, it can be a reflection of internal gender identity, but it does not have to be.
And so I don't dance with a lot of clothes on. Anyone who knows me is like, yeah, no, that's not a thing. Which, like for me, it's not even about getting attention. It's just feeling like that liberation and really being within myself and really connected and happy to be in my body for once after so long. And it's always really soul crushing when that's kind of like crushed by these people who just like are like, oh, you're like naked, oh my god, can I just grab you because I'm going to now, oh, I'm grabbing you. And it's like, my introduction to this podcast actually was the one where you guys talked about misogyny and in the goth and industrial.
The first one or the second one?
I think it was the second one. It was with Andy Herman, and like you guys had like that whole fancy panel. It was really impressive, and I was like, wow, y'all fancy. But it's really frustrating. One of the last times it happened, I was at Cold Waves, and I was in a mosh pit, and I love aggressive. That's why I love industrial so much. But this guy who's being escorted out for being like disorderly and drunk supposedly grabbed my chest with both of his hands, and he like the security guard had his arms around him, but like this guy still did this, and it felt like an eternal moment. And I was just so pissed off and so mortified. And I was like, I'm actually clothed too. Like, it doesn't matter. People always want to like blame people for how they present, like with the things that happen to them. And I just hate that.
Mm-hmm.
And also the way you dance,
Yeah.
like, oh, you're dancing in a suggestive manner. It's like, even if there are times when I dance in a suggestive manner, it doesn't mean it's an invitation. Nothing I do that way is a direct invitation to a specific individual. Same for any woman or anyone who ever presents more feminine, or in general, anybody. Like, unless someone has a direct conversation with you, that is not consent to be grabbed like that.
Yep. Nope.
Yeah.
You should be able to walk down the street totally naked with a giant sign on you saying, I love sex. And when someone comes up, say, nope, not interested. And that should be all it takes.
Yeah, but I don't.
But it's not the
I
case.
feel that I have autonomy, but at the same time, people don't see the female form as having autonomy in that setting. And it hurts me to say that, but that's really what I've experienced over the last almost 8 years now. And I still go out there and I still dance with like no clothes on. And like I've shoved people away from me across rooms multiple times with security guards watching me and just kind of feeling like, this sucks. I feel like I literally have to fend people off of me just because I was born this way, and that's a feeling that it's really hard to grapple with every time you're just trying to go out and really have fun and really connect with yourself. Like, you have to worry about how people are trying to help themselves to your body all the time. And, it's gotten to a point where I'll start dancing on stages and people think I'm doing that to get more attention, but I'm doing it because it serves as a buffer.
Yes.
And like people are like, oh, we can see you up there and dancing and stuff. And it's like, yeah, because you can't grab me from up here. You're not supposed to. And if you try to come up here, you'll get told to get off the stairs and to turn around.
Yeah.
And one of the last times I was up on a stage, there was this group of guys, and they were all standing in front of me, like with drinks in their hand. And I got down and I looked at them dead in the eye, and I was like, you can walk away now because I'm not dancing for you. And you staring at me, like all standing here, is making me really uncomfortable. You need to get a clue. Like, your body language is aggressive. And they're like, I don't understand, man. And I'm like, how do you not know that all of you standing here with a drink in your hand, staring at me, like right in front of me, isn't like a fucking shark waiting for like some like chum to be dropped in its mouth? Like, it's just, I don't understand how people can be so clueless to the way they present themselves in those situations. It's really disheartening. And
well, yeah, I mean, as you said, that is part of how men are raised to understand women as objects to be used or dominated.
I've had
and
women do
that's
it to
just
me
sort
too.
of
I've had women come up to me even when I was on a stage and shove money in my pants. And it's like, I'm sorry, but how is this okay to you? Like, it's just, we all
internalized misogyny.
we all betray this idea that we've all created of women not having their own separate autonomy to enjoy themselves and have fun because we're supposed to use them to have fun. They're not allowed to have their own, and it really, really sucks.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And then also the expression of said autonomy. There are certain forms of expression that have been given these connotations, have been given these ideas that a lot of people just seem to subscribe to, whether the person, quote unquote, performing whatever they are assuming they're performing is actually intending, like you said, dancing on
Yeah,
stage
and
with little or no clothing. People assume that is the stripper trope, and so the
yeah,
putting money in your pants is part of the protocol of that
you're
trope,
not allowed to
and
have your
that's not.
own sexual expression for yourself as a woman, and you're not
Mm-hmm.
allowed to be angry either. And one of my favorite things
No.
is getting really angry on the dance floor when people start to encroach on my space, because then it scares them a lot of times. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I have the most fun, I think, is when I really start throwing elbows and fists just so people will leave me alone. Because they don't know what to do with that. And I wear New Rocks, honking New Rocks. So when I throw my knees and my feet, that if that hits you in the shins, you're done.
And that's especially frustrating in goth spaces because there is a general understanding of it as a safe place where that type of expression is accepted and cherished. And I've seen times in goth clubs where men will come up to talk to a woman or touch her or put their arm on her back or take her hand and kiss it or something like that, and you can clearly tell from the body language of the other person that they're not interested, but they just persist and ignore that until you basically have to yell at them to leave you
Yeah,
alone.
because women
And
in goth are almost like this. They're like an accessory to the experience to a lot of people. And I think that's really, it's really just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, they're definitely oftentimes seen, sometimes from the inside, but oftentimes from the outside, as an easy prize to
Yeah.
win. The idea of the goth chick, the easy goth
Cue
chick,
in Elon Musk
and
and
really,
Grimes, oh, get you a hot
uh-huh.
big titty goth girlfriend or whatever, is the meme that goes around these days. And it's just
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's just so
And that's
dumb.
the belief, and it's I mean, it extends beyond just goth, because anybody who
yeah.
has piercings, tattoos, anyone who's quote unquote alternative tends to experience this. Well, we'll put that more clearly. Anyone who's female generally, or at least female presenting generally, tends to experience this, though it is sometimes occurs to men who look particularly alternative, but it is definitely more from the female presenting point of view. There's always this sense that just being outside of the norm, being this alternative person, is liberty, to ask uncomfortable questions, to touch
Oh
when not
yeah.
asked, to interact in a way that's not appropriate.
I will say one thing. As someone who's queer, people have always asked me if I ever planned on getting surgery or any kind of altercation to the body I was born with. And the only times I've ever considered something like hormone replacement or top surgery are because of the way other people make me feel about my body.
Mm-hmm.
And that
So it's
sucks.
not.
It's not that I don't
Yeah,
have bodily dysphoria. I have social dysphoria. And that's a thing that
Mm-hmm.
people argue about, but honestly, when people are just so obsessed with this external piece that to me doesn't really it's one way or the other, I don't really care. I don't know why you're so obsessed with my body so much. I always joke, if you want them, you can have them. I wish they were detachable. I would just throw them at people. But
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. It's really hard. I would never quit, dancing and expressing myself the way I do. But I would hope that people realize just how hard it can be, even for people who just, it doesn't matter how you dress. If you are a woman or female presenting person who is enjoying yourself in a bar setting, people see that as an invitation almost always.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope to see that change more over time.
Yeah. I mean, I've experienced it a little bit, primarily because a lot of the goth nights I've gone to are also at gay clubs.
Oh
So,
yeah.
um, while I also consider myself genderqueer, though more agender, or I like to term it anti-gender, because I am generally not a fan of the concept of gender in general,
Yeah, it's
and
dumb.
would kind of like to see it go away entirely and let everyone be themselves and not have all this expectation heaped on them because of what is or is not dangling between their legs, etc. But I have been in situations in a goth club at a gay space where there's some gay guy who just won't leave me alone. It's definitely not as common as I'm sure you have. It's not
Did
even
you
in the ballpark of what you've
did you feel
experienced.
afraid?
There have been occasions, yes, but not most of the time. Most of the time, it was polite enough, and I felt that I had the ability, if necessary, to stop anything that could happen.
Hmm.
Um, so fear is not the common emotion. It's more annoyance than fear, which is like I said, again, not even in the ballpark of what most women will experience in that sort of a situation. But I have had an inkling of it, and I've also had it from other directions, not necessarily from the assumptions point of view as far as sexual availability, but the idea when someone's in and doesn't understand the concept of dancing alone
Oh God.
and feels that dancing always needs to be
Oh yeah.
partnered, and we're like, I'm standing watching the floor and someone comes up to me and just grabs my hand like, come on and dance, and dance with me and do this thing,
Uh-oh.
and I'm like, I'm not that interested in dancing with
Oh yeah. I
anybody.
hate
I mean,
I ugh.
I mean, they may be a fine person and they may be great, but I don't do partner dancing much. I mean, I do it every once in a while. Like I said, I've done the grinding thing, but that was a mutual, it just kind of evolved. And even then I'm hyper conscious about, I'm spending that entire time thinking about, what can I do here? I'm kind of doing this thing, but where are the boundaries? What are the borders? I'm very uncomfortable in this
So
situation.
you know that song?
Um,
I think it's a Covenant song where it's like I stand alone or whatever. I just butchered
Hmm.
that.
mhm.
I'm sorry, Eskel. Um, but it's like I dance alone. Seriously, I can't dance with other people. Like it feels so unnatural to me. Like I can dance with my partner occasionally when he will come out, but I I hate dancing with people. Like it's just so uncomfortable for me. And
Yeah, I've
people
done.
grabbed me. The one time that was probably most particularly uncomfortable was this man in New York City came up to me and grabbed my forearm and he was like, "Oh, I saw you dancing. You should get on stage. Like you dance really good." And like he wouldn't let go of my arm and he was like dragging me towards the stage and I was just like, "No, let go of my arm." And he came back and did that like twice and I went up to a bouncer and they were like, "Oh, well, like we can't really do anything. Like, like you gotta take care of yourself." I'm like, I gotta take
Wow.
care of myself in New York City. Fuck you, dude. Like, fuck you, New York
Yeah.
Yeah.
City. Like, and it's like I don't like hold that to a place or anything, but it was one of those experiences where I hadn't been down in the city much, and I was just like, you know, I just I just would love if someone would that has the privilege to make this person listen because I don't have that as someone who presents more feminine. I don't.
Hmm.
You know what? That's something I have also noticed is in a few of these interactions that I've seen, no one really kind of steps in to say, ask, "Hey, are you all right? Do you need help?" Or, unless someone's being belligerently drunk or assaulting people, generally the bouncers won't really step in or be alerted
Yeah,
even.
because I mean, like,
Uh,
even like no good deed goes unpunished. People probably feel afraid that
mm,
they'll get in the middle of something and become involved. You know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Mm.
Kitty Gervaisi, but her neighbors
Yes.
supposedly heard her being murdered and did nothing. And
It was Genovese.
sorry, I said it wrong. I know I was pronouncing it wrong, but that's one instance that I can think of to compare it where people will see things happening, but they just really don't feel comfortable getting involved, or they just, I don't know. I don't know what goes through
Yeah,
their mind.
there are some problems with that example because there are records of people who did call the police, but the overall point still stands. There's actually a really good short story by Harlan Ellison that is promoting that, or not promoting that, but it took that as a jumping off point and turned it into, going back to a ritual thing, an idea of the shared sacrifice of these gods of, I guess, cruelty, or I don't remember the exact details, but there's this idea that that was a ritual sacrifice, not that the watchers were doing the action to the person, but the act of watching and not and sort of reveling in the view of it, and the voyeurism of the experience was in its own way a form of ritualistic sacrifice to these deities, which is a really interesting story, and it is an interesting take on human experience. But there have been some problems, and there's some evidence that it was the police trying to cover their ass. Some of the news about how, oh, nobody ever called us, and we were never informed, and everybody just blithely watched this event happen.
Just another way for media to blame the everyday person instead of those in power. I get it. I understand.
But there is a decided reality of the concept of the bystander effect.
Yes.
Where people, you are in the most danger when you're in the largest crowd. And it's not always because everyone's being voyeuristic, but it's everybody expects or wants someone else to do it. It's a shifting of the onus of responsibility. When it's just one-on-one, humanity takes over, and you're like, this is a person in need. No one else can help them. I have to help them. And oftentimes people will. But if there are 4, 5, 7, 20 people around, everyone's like, oh, I'm not comfortable with this. When are one of these people going to come in and stop it? And that's usually what seems to happen.
There have been plenty of studies done on that, even in like popular media TV shows. They've shown examples of that. And just a shout out to Cadaver Kelly in the chat room. She mentioned that a few minutes ago, that the bystander effect is part of that. I did want to ask though, these are obviously problems. How prevalent do you think they are within our thing? Do they kind of stand out more because they are rare, or is it
I don't
still
think they're rare.
No,
okay.
They're not as I'd say they might be more rare than they are in other out club dancing scenes, but it's still too common.
I think it has to do with the amount of population of which people are involved. You know, you have to think about how many people are actually involved, because it is a subculture. It's not everyday culture. It's not a top 40 bar. Like, it's a lot smaller of a population that's involved. At least that's how I see it.
And I can say, going along with that, I've found that in smaller scenes, in smaller club environments, because like I said, my first club scene was a rural college town. So we were pretty small and we all kind of knew each other. And we would actually defend each other when outsiders came in. You know, when drunk frat boys would come in and would target one of the people we all knew, we would circle the wagons and we would get that person kicked out. So it would definitely happen, but it only seems to happen in those smaller communities where everybody knows each other. And as it gets larger and larger, and the bystander effect and that sort of thing becomes more of a dynamic, and you don't necessarily know the person, or you don't know the people around you, and you don't want to be that person that stands out. So those larger scenes, even though we might profess to be all for all this free expression and all for this equality and autonomy, a lot of people are very reticent to take that first step. And I can't claim to not have been part of that problem on occasion. I do step in every once in a while, but I have had that experience of, I don't know if I really want to be involved in this situation. And
So
that's on me.
I just want to say it's not always frat boys.
Oh, I know. Their
um,
insiders can do it too.
and a lot of times those people get passes because of their clout and how long they've been around. And
Yep.
that's really frustrating. And we see it with these like musicians, but it's also with people in your local scene, you know? And
Yep.
with this rise of call out culture and the way that people are trying to hold people accountable, I find it very problematic where people feel like they're doing this great service and they're patting themselves on the back when they like call someone out or they like are siding one way or the other. And I feel like it's a check on their list and they're done, and they don't give that much attention to the like minutia and the like details of just what goes into play in these kinds of scenarios. You know, I'm not trying to necessarily play devil's advocate, but it's not so simple as someone is a bad guy and someone is a good guy.
Yeah.
There's so
Totally agree.
much going on when things like this happen with assault or, you know, just being groped at the bar. It's not ever just being groped, by the way, but like you get what I mean. And I just I feel I get the sense so much that people try to really strip away a lot of the humanity that goes on in these like exchanges, and it's a really big disservice to handling them. I don't feel like it's productive. I don't feel like it teaches anyone anything. I feel like people want to be extremely punitive without actually using it to teach themselves and teach others who might be a jeopardy for making the same mistakes. And it's not always these frat boys who a lot of times can be educated. You know, I'd rather them be educated than ejected, to be quite honest. And no, it's not fun, and sometimes it's not doable if they're extremely intoxicated. But, you know, like, goth is for everyone. Like, I really truly feel that way. The first people I met who were into goth, they wore like graphic shirts from like just like the store and like jeans and like a pair of tennis shoes. They wore Hawaiian shirts and cargo shorts and like Doc Martens. Like they didn't just wear all black. And you know, as long as you're open-minded and respectful and willing to learn, and maybe it may not make sense to you right away, but as long as you're open-minded enough and respectful, I think you have a chance to get it and learn if you make mistakes, or if you come from a top 40 bar earlier in the night and you just like approach women the same way you did at the last bar. You know, goth can really teach people like a real way to like engage with other people, a real way to treat women. Like it's a place in a goth setting to really just make a big change. And I feel like people really underestimate that. I really do.
You're right. Yeah, it's much more damning when it's somebody who knows better and is doing it willfully. They're not ignorant. They're not fish out of water. They know what they're doing, and they, for whatever reason, they feel they have the license to do it, whether it's because of cultural capital, whether it's because of clout, whether it's because of just fame, or they feel that people have their back, or that people are unwilling to cross them because they can, they can clap back and, ruin someone else's reputation within the community. That those are the most toxic. Those are the most damning individuals. So yes, you're absolutely right that at least the people who come in from the outside, they could be making an honest mistake. They can be educated. Those who already know and choose to forsake that education, they're infinitely more difficult to reach and can become a major problem.
I used to always be like, I was born in the wrong time. I wish I was growing up during the 90s or 80s because the music and the culture just looks so amazing. But I'm so glad that I wasn't around for that because that would have just been hell for me. Like, it would have been
Mm.
worse socially. Like, the social climate of that, oh, thank you. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for the progress that has been made today because the way I am and the way I dance, I would have basically probably been assaulted, like literally flat out, so much more back in those times than like now. Like, I can say that with confidence just because I just feel like as a world, we really have grown. And just because goth is a very accepting culture, it does not mean that it is excused from those like ways of thinking about women and about autonomy and about the way that we treat each other in an intimate space.
Yeah, there's always the danger of moral licensing where just because you think good thoughts or have good ideals or maybe do a couple of good deeds earlier in the day, that doesn't mean you get a stop later.
Mm-mm.
You've built up enough good credit that you can then spend it and be a total asshole. Um, and oh, but I did all these good things, so it's okay. No, it's always bad. Doesn't matter how many good things you did prior or after. It's just what you do now.
Mm. I see so much extremes in the way people are handling these things, and a lot of it is online, but I feel like people are drawing these hard
Yeah.
lines in the sand, and like
Yeah.
behavior
Mm-hmm.
absolutely needs hard lines in the sand, but human beings,
Mm-hmm.
the aim for the way that we should treat human beings is to educate them if at all possible. Like, I'm going into social work
Yeah.
and I really do believe in rehabilitative work versus punitive because I really just feel like there's so much more damage done. And
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
Oh
feel
yeah, I've
that
been seeing a
way
lot of
Yeah.
stuff
I
about.
feel that way about social issues, like these everyday mistakes, because they are. People touching without consent, doing these other acts without consent are everyday things that we have to confront. And we're at a time now where we're trying to learn and really find the ways to create these scripts for how we handle these problems. They've always been there, but we're trying to find the voice
Mm.
and make sure everyone has the confidence to use that voice in those situations, to
Yeah.
almost like get rid of the bystander effect and instead be role models every day for each other.
Mm.
Yeah, now we've become somewhat addicted in today's society now as sort of a backlash against the, oh, let's turn aside and pretend it doesn't happen.
Hmm.
Our backlash now is more towards this shaming and outrage culture where it's all about conspicuous shows of you're a terrible person and you should be ashamed and all this stuff. And yes, oftentimes the target of that shaming and outrage deserved it to a degree. We get so caught up in just this ever snowballing sense of shaming and outrage towards
Mob
this
Hmm.
other,
mentality.
the mob mentality, exactly, that we choose to use that as our outlet and then don't choose to take what lessons and look at ourselves and, okay, if you're outraged about other people and think they should be shamed, what do you do that should be shameful or that you need to
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
address? We're so busy looking out and we're not looking in.
Yep.
And all of us, I think, have something that, we could fix, we could change. And
Mm-hmm.
shame isn't a way to, you shouldn't be ashamed. Shame is, in my opinion, not a healthy way of getting anything to change. It's usually makes things even more entrenched. But being able to look inside and acknowledge where you have faults, where you have flaws is important. And spending all of your time looking out and pointing out other people's flaws takes away the time that you could be reflecting on yourself and the community and the culture that you're a part of, and what could be improved there.
And people are afraid because we're focused so much on how people make mistakes, and we're not focused on how they can amend them. We're not focused on what the path to rehabilitation looks like socially when we make these mistakes. And, that's an important next step that we can't ignore, especially not now, because we're seeing all of these people, even if they're just celebrities or musicians, like they were people that matter to you, and you're like, oh, well, do I have to stop listening to their music then? It's like, or, think about talking to them if you can, and if not, just think like, they're a person just like me, and they have to come to grips and really work through the mistakes they've made. And I don't think it's fair for anybody to say that no one is allowed that. It's really not. I mean, clearly
Yeah.
there are things that where people, a lot of times it's not just the action alone, it's the way that people dig their heels in and refuse to say they were wrong that really speak louder to me. When you refute
Yes.
that your actions were not wrong, then
Yeah.
clearly you have a lot more work to do than just working on that specific incident. Oh.
Right. And
Yeah, and I think specific, importantly, it's not up to the people who have been victimized or traumatized by a specific individual. I do think that in a broader sense, we'd like to abstract the event from the sort of context of where that behavior came from, and we miss out on the chances that we have, especially, white men, the chances that we have to change and impact someone else's behavior. But I think it's important just to note that, like, people who have been victimized and hurt, it's not their job to try and fix or educate the people
Oh
that hurt
yeah,
them. That's where we
we
need to step
do,
up.
because even if you do stand up as a victim, like, people still tell you your experiences aren't real,
Yeah.
or that you're overreacting, or that, what did you expect? You were dressed this way, you danced like this, like, or even just like, well, they were drunk. And it's like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care about these excuses. I care about you making them and why you feel compelled to do so. Why don't you feel compelled to ask why these are things we feel are excusable? Like, that's what I care about. And it shouldn't be like this double down thing on the
Yeah.
people it happens to. It shouldn't. Absolutely not. And
Yeah.
that in its own sense, that's its own bystander effect, where the victims are becoming responsible to try to educate and like work through this, and the people watching it are just like watching and then like forming their opinions and spectating on the event as it happens.
Well, it's even paradoxical. I was mentioning in the chat that it's a common, common, like, imperialist racist perception that black people, and especially black women, aren't allowed to be angry, but yet we expect them to be the ones who take on the burden of trying to change the behavior. Whereas, like you were saying, Trey, like, the job is that we need to be introspective and sort of try to decolonize our own individual issues and help those within our close circle, and that's the way that we can create a broader change rather than everything. So just to echo everything you've said, I agree. Cool. So I had some notes about cyber goth and festivals and things, but that seems really off topic at this point.
Sorry.
So no, this was the main thing that I wanted to talk about that we're exploring here. And I think that's important, and I think that's where the value is coming from in this episode. That other stuff we can talk about on another show. So Unless there's anything else you guys wanted to bring up around this issue, we can move on and do the album review real quick.
No, I think I'm good. Do you have anything to add, Trey?
Not on our current topic. I do have things to talk about regarding CyberGoth, but I can certainly do it in another episode. I have no need to draw this one out yet further.
I don't want to be a jerk, but I really don't feel like I'm the person to talk to about CyberGoth. I feel like you need someone who actually loves CyberGoth to like give you like the perspective that's fair and a service to it, because I
So I say if we do want to discuss that, I agree, having somebody who, having a counterpoint, because I'm not anti CyberGoth, but I'm not necessarily a proponent of it either.
Album review.
All right, so album review. This month we are reviewing the new EP from the band Tomb of Love. Their Bandcamp page says, known for their works on extreme metal, doom metal, and crust bands, Tomb of Love is a side project created in early 2019 by Tiago Sader and Luan Lima in order to explore the gloomy yet electric swamps of goth rock, post-punk, and death rock. Not to be confused with swamp goth. We're not going to bring that up. Let's play a track.
I definitely need to Google that.
No, please save yourself 10 minutes of your life.
No, always Google it. It's always important to be informed.
We're going to play a track from the album, and this track is titled What the Moon Brings.
Along the nameless
So as far as Tomb of Love, it was an interesting band. I mean, I enjoyed the music. I thought it was certainly an interesting band, some interesting songs, but their source coming from the heavy metal, death doom scene was very, very clear in the music.
Was it?
I thought it was.
I didn't. I couldn't tell.
See, to me, it sounded like basically metal with the amps turned down. So it was like
Really?
metal gone acoustic a
Were
little
we
bit.
listening to the same band?
I don't know,
Oh,
but I mean, I listen to metal as well as goth, though metal is not
Okay.
necessarily my core genre. But I listen to a fair amount of it, and when I do listen to metal, I tend to lean more towards doom metal rather than death metal and black metal and
Mhm.
all that. I tend to like the slower, doomier stuff. And I just found that this band, while they were trying to evince this idea of post punk and death rock, I don't think they quite got it. And part of that was I tend to be very, very rhythmically focused. That is almost always my
Mm.
focus. Um, and their rhythms, their drumming, and their bass work were still pretty metal. They still had a lot of the sort of fast drum. In my opinion, one of my pet peeves around metal is this addiction to the crash cymbal. I don't know why you need to have crash cymbals going all the time, but they didn't use it. They did tone it down in this particular side project, but there were a few songs where it was just all the way through. And then the bass, one thing that's noteworthy about post punk that goth picked up, and all the other things that spun out from the post punk thing, is this foregrounding of the bass. This bass as a
Mhm.
melodic rather than a support instrument, because in traditional rock and metal picks up on this as well, the bass is a part of just the percussion. It's not even very present. It's sometimes hard to find, the bass. It's kind of in there. It's grounding the harmony, so you kind of know what chords you're in and what keys you're doing, and it's emphasizing things along with the percussion to keep steady time. Whereas a lot of what post punk did was, and this I think, at least from what I've read of the history, was brought out of some of the bass based music, a lot of dub and reggae, which was very focused on the bass tone. And you had the big block parties with the giant speakers, and it was very much all about the feel of the bass and the rhythm and the melody of the bass. And a lot of post punk picked up on that and used that. So there is a lot of this melodic bass work that's more complicated and does have a rhythmic underpinning, but isn't so directly tied to the percussion. And goth also picks up on a lot of that, and it's also a hallmark of goth music, and maybe to a lesser extent death rock, but death rock does it too. And I didn't see that in this band at all. It was very much the percussion and bass, standard rock, standard stuff coming through metal. They didn't have the heavy distorted guitars. They weren't using power chords. And the lyrical content was fitting, but then the lyrical content between goth and metal, depending on your genre of metal, isn't necessarily a leap. Hence why you have goth metal and some of that other stuff. There's plenty of lyrical overlap there. But from a musicological standpoint, I wasn't hearing a lot of those touchstones of goth or post punk. And it really did sound to me not too dissimilar from metal, just without all the excess distortion, it was metal shrunk down to a small band. So while I enjoyed it, because I do enjoy metal and I thought the music was good, it wasn't what I was expecting when it was talking of it as we're going into post punk and death rock and goth rock. I felt that I could see where they were trying to go. I just don't think they quite got there for my tastes.
I I feel like I was listening to a different band.
Hey, totally disagreeing is totally cool. Go for it.
I think the lead singer from the Soft Moon is from Brazil. He might just be from South America.
Ooh, Soft Moon. Yeah, maybe.
I hope he doesn't listen. He probably
I
will
don't
never
remember.
listen to this. But anyway, I haven't really ever really listened to any kind of like goth music out of Brazil before, so that was interesting. Um, I liked it. I thought that it sounded very much like a little bit of a faster paced. Um, what's that one fancy band? I was literally just Sisters of Mercy, but that's like my
Mm.
baseline for these things. Oh, it's goth. It must be Sisters of Mercy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not alone. I
That's
have
pretty
my
common, yeah.
issues with that as well, but you're definitely not alone.
They weren't Bauhaus. They were more Sisters of Mercy in the like kind of like groove of like the slow groove that you can do the goth dancing to. You know, the goth dancing.
Mm.
I liked it though. It's not my favorite kind of music, and for anything that falls into that kind of genre, specifically more geared towards the like old school sound, I really prefer when it has an element of its own, and I kind of just didn't really feel that with this band. But I only
Yeah,
gave it
I agree.
a once through listen, so maybe if I listened to it more, I would pick up on more nuance. Yeah, I would give it a 3. It's not offensive. Doesn't really grab me. Uh, I love that their album name is super serious. A permanent reminder of our failure. So serious.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. So for me, and I'll be brief here. I listened to the album about 3 times. I also got kind of a Fields of the Nephilim and Vision thing vibe off of the music. And at first my first listen, I was really into it, cool, like classic goth rock kind of sound. It was nice to hear, a little different from what I've been listening to a lot of recently. Certainly not a post-punk or death rock kind of sound either for me. But on the second and third listen, I don't know, it just got a little boring. Just because it's so familiar, which isn't a bad thing. Just in the mood that I'm in at the moment, it was too much of of the same kind of thing.
Kind of how I've been corrupting you.
So, yeah. Trey showing up in my dreams, sucking my blood, feeding me his vitae. He's turning me into a creature of the night. So again, like if I had rated this on my first listen, I would have given it a 4. But having sat with it for a while, I'm probably going to give it a 2.5 or 3, just kind of average. Good. I think it's a good album to throw in and kind of mix up your playlist if that's not the kind of thing you generally listen to. But as something that I would want to sit and listen to over and over and over, it's not really doing it for me.
So I never really give it a number recommended or a number review on mine, but I would also give it about a 3. I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. It was fine. I didn't think they reached their goal as I expressed. And I did listen to some of their other stuff. I listened to some of their other music just to find out where they were kind of coming from. And it was definitely a significant change in sound. So I'm not going to claim they were just doing the same old thing, but quieter, which is kind of what I said earlier.
Yeah.
But while it was a change from their normal style, and it was definitely a different style, it still didn't feel like it was escaping from the domain of metal very much. It felt more like it was going to, the sort of metal ballad trope where they take it, tone it down, and make it a little more acoustic. And I felt it went closer to that side of things, and it did approach some of the goth things. And he definitely had the voice down. He got the vocal trope.
Yeah.
That was spot on. That's to some degree a pet peeve of mine of some goth, because I do like voices that are unique and not that same doomy little Andrew Eldritch voice that has been aped by dozens upon dozens of bands who are just trying to very self-consciously be goth. I like things that that are a bit different and unique. But he definitely, the lead singer, the voice was down. My main issue was just it was mostly the rhythm section. I mean, the guitars were pretty close too. They had the reverb, okay. I don't necessarily agree that is a requirement of goth, but it is a trope. It's a decided trope. And they definitely had that part down. So the guitar tone was spot on. The vocals spot on. Rhythm section still kind of metal and hard rock.
If your guitars don't reverberate as if through the halls of Castle on Toronto, then it's not goth. Let's move on. We're running long anyway. Let's finish off with our sinister suggestion.
So you've got to be interested in death. It's the last great taboo. It's the only taboo left.
Precisely. I mean, why is it, do you think, that everyone in here is dressed in black? It's a celebration of death.
No, I just like the clothes.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, the clothes look good. Yeah, I mean, death looks good. Charles Manson, yeah? No, he was cool.
Don't know if I mentioned it before, but I'm actually a vampire.
Sinister Suggestions.
So Sinister Suggestions, if you don't know, is where we recommend any kind of media or events or something we've been into recently that we think you would get some value out of. So would anyone like to start? Otherwise, I'll give mine.
I have my own things.
Have at it.
So I mentioned my project with my friend Matt. It's really his project. I just sing and help write some stuff sometimes. That project is called Vellocinate. It's spelled VELLOCINATE. And you can find us on Bandcamp. And also,
fucking rad.
Yeah,
yes,
I'm proud of it. I also have a page for the dance night that eventually will happen. And even if you're not in the upstate New York area, we will be sharing music, like mixes and other things. So we're on Facebook as Catharsis. And it's like a backslash Catharsis Troy NY is the link. And
very cool. Yeah, and I will put links to those in the show notes. So if you're listening on your phone, you can swipe either left or right depending on your device, and there will be a link there you can follow. Cool. I have got a couple music suggestions. I mentioned at the beginning of the year that I'm going to be really pushing the music side of things, and especially recommending bands that are consist of people of color or women or trans people, et cetera, et cetera. And I've got a couple this week. The first of which is a band called It's For Us. And the name of their most recent album is, I believe, Stay. And they're a Swedish post-punk band, really good, kind of in line with the sort of more synthy side of post-punk, but mixed with the like classic. There's some tracks that are like classic, post-punk songs, and it's really fucking good. I mean, I don't really have too much to say about it. If you're goth and you're into goth music, that's a band that you're going to want to check out. And the other band is they just put out an EP, and actually Kelly, who is in the chat, did a video reviewing their album. I'm not going to be able to pronounce the band name because I'm me, but it's something like Neon Tzigane. I don't know.
Tzigane,
I'm
probably.
terrible.
It sounds like it's
Tzigane.
I think is it Eastern European or Gypsy?
Well, they're from London,
Rom?
but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Because Tzigane is a type of dance within Rom dance. So it could be they're trying to evoke that sort of an idea. I don't know. I'd have to see how it was spelled to say, but that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. And they've got an EP out called Del Wesh. And they're an interesting band. They kind of fit into the Neon Tzigane is what Kelly's telling me in chat. Tzigane. Tzigane? I don't know. Look, you can spell it out for me. I'm still not going to pronounce it correctly. I'm sorry. This is my life. So anyway, they've got an interesting mix. They kind of get into the doom metal side of things, like we heard with the band we reviewed, but they make it interesting because they add synth pop elements, they add post punk elements, like recognizably post punk and synth pop, with the recognizably metal sort of tropes, and it's just a 2-person band, and it's really good. Their 4-track EP, I think, is very cool and really varied. So that is another my other Sinister suggestion.
Yeah, they've got a pronunciation guide on their Bandcamp, so it's just Tzigane, Neon Tzigane.
Okay. I have.
So there you go.
Oh yeah, I do
2
see
more
that now.
recommendations.
Go for it.
One of them
Yeah.
is the Black Dresses. They're from Toronto. They're trans 2-piece that is amazing. Can't even really figure out how to describe them. If you've ever listened to Sophie, it's heavy electronic and it's very interesting. I haven't listened to their newest stuff, but I've been told it's really good. So definitely check out Black Dresses. And my friend Adra, who has her project Fires, is releasing a new record soon. So definitely check out Fires and support trans artists.
Is that I think I've heard of them. I'll have to double check. But yeah, awesome. Cool. I'll add those as well in the show notes. What do you got, Trey?
So my Sinister suggestion is going to be music as well, but I'm going to go with some history. So I'm going to go actually pre-goth.
Okay, very cool.
Fairly enough, to one of the big genreal influences for the whole post-punk movement, probably closer to the industrial side, but I guess the more common term for the genre, though it is oftentimes viewed as offensive, is krautrock, also known as Kosmisch or German cosmic music. So I'm going to recommend checking that out if you're not familiar with it. It's a great way of hearing some stuff that is some of the progenitors from the early 70s to what became post-punk and then morphed into some of the goth and electronic side of goth as well as industrial. So definitely an influence for your future pop side of things as well. Some bands I would recommend, some of the big 3 of the genre are going to be Neu, N-E-U, ! Kind of like Neubauten, but just Neu. And then Can, who was a huge influence for Gary Newman. Someone, I believe Newman did some covers of some Can stuff or was involved on a Can cover album. And then Amon Düül, which is another interesting band, though the singer of Amon Düül gets a little bit under my skin sometimes, but it's definitely interesting and unique. So check those out if you've not heard of them, if you want to see some of the rumblings that happened before the post-punk explosion. And that's also sort of the stem of early electronic music. Kraftwerk is usually pinged as sort of one of the later evolutions of krautrock and kind of moving between the krautrock and some of the electronic dance styles that we are more familiar with now. So yeah, just check some of that out. It's definitely stuff that I really enjoy. And it'll give you a little bit of a history of some of the inception of the music that we love and crave these days.
Awesome. What a fantastic spread of music there. That's a lot of really cool stuff to go check out if you haven't heard it. So, Hayley, thank you so much for coming on. This was truly a delight.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure to have a really great conversation with you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you feel that way. I was a little nervous. I was like, I don't know if this is what they were looking for.
Oh no, that was wonderful. This has been a fantastic episode.
I'm
I
glad
think
you feel that way.
We don't have expectations. We have conversations.
There you go. There's your tagline. What make it spooky?
I was going to say it needs to be more goth.
Yeah, that's a little too live, love, laugh for my tastes, but yeah.
And then we die.
In 2 weeks, we'll be back with a brand new episode. We're going to be talking with Carl Sprecklin, professor of leisure studies at Leeds Metropolitan University. He recently published a book titled The Evolution of Goth Culture, The Origins and Deeds of the New Goths. We're going to be chatting with him about We're going to be talking with him about why he thinks goth is in danger of dying out because of commodification and the emphasis of fashion, among other things. And this wouldn't be a full episode if I didn't mention that the only reason we continue to exist and produce content is because of everyone who supported us on Patreon. If you value the content and you think that this is something you would like to support going out into the world, and that this type of conversation has value, you can head over to patreon.com/Cemetery Confessions. We have tiers starting at just $1 a month. And then going up from there, you can get exclusive merchandise. You can get access to live streams of the episodes. You get early access to episodes before they're released, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you head over to patreon.com/Cemetery Confessions, you can take a look at what kind of rewards we have there. And of course, because I value everyone who does support us so much, I'm going to take a couple minutes here to mention our Patreon supporters. So at the founders level, we have Daniel, SJ, Esmeralda, Abigail, Stella, Tyra, and Christine. Thank you so much for your continued compassion, kindness, and interaction on the Patreon page and with everything we do. At the Nocturnal Council level, we have Kyra, Dawn, Jason of Junkyard Bat on Etsy, Christina, Esther, Hayshaker, Natalie, Isidoro, Michelle, DJ Azzy from Florida, Michelle of Skullgirdle on YouTube, Thomas, Cadaver Kelly, who is also a YouTuber I highly recommend checking out, Isabel, Amber Owl, Fifth Dream, Nephilim Incorruptus, also of YouTube, Stevie, Amy, Mike Mess of the band Hearts Fail, and William. And also, if I failed to mention one of your projects on our little segment here, please send me a message. I've got a list and some notes, and I may be forgetting something. That happens a lot in my old age. And then finally, at the Crow's Call level, we have David of the Goth subreddit, Isabel, Kevin, who we actually recently had on a Patreon exclusive stream, talking about doing sort of a follow-up to the idea of goth as a middle-class subculture and why that's a problem. So that's something you guys may want to check out if you join. Top Down Tom, Sarah, Morgan, David, Jen, Irene, Abby, Jonathan, Becca, Kelly, Dom, who we haven't heard from in a while, but from Australia, he actually sent in some listener audio feedback for the podcast a couple years ago, something we haven't had on the show in a long time. Michelle, King Ryanex, Marco, Alex DeWinter, who you can find on Instagram as Alex_Groofty. He posts photos of his artwork there. Eduardo, Dark Goth Fairy, Andrew, Jason, Stuart, Margarita, Christian, Marissa, Jamie, Kimberly, Alex Kennedy of the We Have a Technical podcast and the website idieyouDie.com, Mr. Polar Bear, congratulations on the engagement, Dagger Dance, Caroline of the blog Caroline Sometimes, also congratulations on the engagement, Elena, GPS, Eternal Winter, who you can find on YouTube, Bronwyn, David, Country Fried Goth, who you can also find on YouTube and Facebook, Mark, Angel, Anne, Heather, Laurel, Christopher, who has been contributing to the Obscura Undead website, a great resource for new bands and news and that kind of thing, Wolfie, Kelly, Ryan, Joseph, Gopal Metro Gopal Metro on Patreon. Check out his music. Susan, Kay, Beth, and Cher. Thank you all so much for continuing to support us. You have really been the wind under my fuzzy bat wings, or the vitae in my immortal veins. This has really been the motivation that has kept me going and kept me putting and pouring all the time and effort into the podcast. So thank you so much for your support. As I said, we'll be back in a couple weeks with a brand new episode. We'll be back on Patreon for those of you hanging out with us there. Thank you all so much for listening, and until next time, stay dark.
The preceding program is a member of The Belfry, a network of blogs, podcasts, and videos for the darkly inclined. Go to thebelfry.rip for more information.